When it comes to Drake, the universe has wasted absolutely no time making things easy for us, because we just found out that Drake has been hit with yet another lawsuit, and not just any lawsuit. His own lyrics have genuinely come to life, because Drake, along with Aiden Ross, academics, and several others, have just been named in a federal RICO case. And before we go any further, if you are ready to see how this Drake RICO is one of the most damaging things we have ever witnessed in the entire streaming era of music, leave a like and sit back, because this one is going to be significant. With the paperwork that Drake has just been handed, and with what it is exposing, this is not a one-off accusation or an isolated incident targeting a single action. A federal RICO case is something entirely different. It connects a chain of behavior and establishes a pattern of criminal enterprise. And what this filing is laying out is a pipeline of coordinated fraud that shows how the so-called most streamed rapper in the world has apparently been running up those numbers in the most illegitimate way imaginable. And if Drake was still thinking about dropping Iceman, he might want to consider renaming it the Botman album instead, because what we are finding out about the fraudulent foundation underneath his entire streaming catalog is genuinely stunning.
Because what this RICO case is revealing, and this is only the beginning of what is going to come out, is that Drake, working with Stake, has been operating as a pyramid scheme, specifically designed to artificially inflate his streaming numbers across every major platform. And every single claim that Drake and his team made about bots, industry plants, and manipulated streams, every accusation they threw at Kendrick Lamar throughout the entire beef, has turned out to be nothing more than a deliberate deflection, a projection of their own guilt and their own strategy to game the system for as long as they could get away with it.
And without wasting any more time, let's go directly into what this lawsuit is actually saying. Because if this is what Drake's 2026 looks like on day one, the question of what day 365 is going to look like is genuinely terrifying to consider. Sports and gambling attorney Daniel Wallach, who broke this story, described it as follows. The last gambling lawsuit of 2025 is a federal RICO class action filed against Stake and rapper Drake for promoting an illegal online gambling platform under the cover of a fake sweepstakes operation. And Drake is specifically accused of using that platform to artificially inflate the play counts of his own music.
The lawsuit goes further. Drake, Aiden Ross, and the individual who runs platforms like Academics TV have been using Stake's tipping program, described in the filing as an unlimited and completely unregulated money transfer mechanism that operates outside the oversight of any financial regulator, to move money between themselves and to finance a coordinated artificial streaming operation. Through that tipping function, the defendants allegedly financed fraudulent streams of Drake's music, fabricated his popularity across platforms, actively targeted and disparaged competitors and label executives, and deliberately distorted the recommendation algorithms that determine what music audiences actually hear.
And it gets worse from there. At the very core of the scheme, the lawsuit states that Drake, acting directly and through willing co-conspirators, deployed automated bots in streaming farms to artificially inflate the play counts of his music across major platforms, including Spotify, which makes his public complaints about Spotify from just a few weeks ago particularly ironic given the personal context now attached to them. These inauthentic streams were reportedly calibrated to mislead royalty and recommendation engines, manufacture the appearance of popularity, distort playlists and charts, and divert both financial value and audience attention away from legitimate artists and toward Drake's manufactured metrics. And the manipulation goes beyond just streaming numbers. The lawsuit also details how the Stake platform's user-to-user tipping and encrypted internal transfer systems were used to funnel payments to bot operators and amplifiers, all designed to keep those transactions hidden from any public or regulatory oversight. As one specific example, the filing documents a publicly recorded $100,000 tip transfer between Drake and Aiden Ross in 2023. And then, just days before the complaint was filed, Drake reportedly gave Aiden Ross a $220,000 car as a gift. These transfers and others like them are being characterized in the lawsuit as the financial infrastructure underwriting the entire botting and paid engagement operation.
And when you step back and look at the full picture of what this lawsuit is alleging, the coordination between Drake, Aiden Ross, and the Academics TV network, the use of stake as a disguised financial pipeline, the bot farms generating millions of fake streams, the algorithmic manipulation suppressing other artists, this is genuinely the most elaborate and the most damaging streaming fraud case we have ever seen from any artist in the music industry, not just recently, ever. And the person at the center of all of it is the man who spent the better part of 2024 accusing Kendrick Lamar of doing exactly what he has apparently been doing himself on a massive scale.
And for what it means from a pure music industry standpoint, if even a substantial portion of these allegations hold up, this is not just a bad story for Drake. This is a potentially industry-altering revelation. Because what we are seeing alleged here is a fully coordinated pyramid scheme, where a network of partners collaborated to defraud streaming platforms, recording labels, and every legitimate artist trying to build a career through real audience engagement. The scale of it is unlike anything we have seen documented, and the fact that it involves the most streamed artist in the world makes the potential fallout genuinely hard to calculate.
Because when you think about how streaming royalties actually work, where all artists share from a single revenue pool, divided based on each person's percentage of total streams, every fraudulent stream Drake generated was not just inflating his numbers, it was actively stealing from the pool that every other artist on every major platform depends on. Every independent musician, every emerging artist, every songwriter trying to build something real was getting a smaller cut because of what Drake was allegedly pumping into the system. And that is not just a music industry problem. That is a direct and documented harm to the livelihoods of real people trying to make real art.
And the detail about the person running Academics TV, apparently hiding out in Australia the entire time, cosplaying as a genuine hip-hop voice and cultural commentator while actively participating in this scheme from the other side of the world, is one of the details in this lawsuit that hits differently when you think about how much damage that particular voice has done to authentic conversations in hip-hop over the past several years. This was not someone operating from inside the culture. This was someone using the image of the culture as a cover, while helping to systematically defraud everyone within it. And when you trace the financial cycle being described in this lawsuit, Drake moving money through Stake's tipping system to bot operators, those bots inflating streaming numbers, those inflated numbers generating increased royalty payouts, those payouts being reinvested back into the scheme to generate more fraudulent streams, what you are looking at is a self-perpetuating fraud machine. A closed loop designed to continuously extract more money from the system by making Drake appear more popular than he actually is. And the people being robbed on the other end of that loop are the artists, the labels, and the streaming platforms who played by the rules and trusted that the numbers they were seeing were real. And when you trace the financial cycle being described in this lawsuit, Drake moving money through Stake's tipping system to bot operators, those bots inflating streaming numbers, those inflated numbers generating increased royalty payouts, those payouts being reinvested back into the scheme to generate more fraudulent streams, what you are looking at is a self-perpetuating fraud machine. A closed loop designed to continuously extract more money from the system by making Drake appear more popular than he actually is. And the people being robbed on the other end of that loop are the artists, the labels, and the streaming platforms who played by the rules and trusted that the numbers they were seeing were real.
And this is exactly why we are still talking about Drake in 2026. Because what is being alleged here is not a personal failing or a cultural grievance. It is active, large-scale fraud that has materially damaged the earning potential of other musicians and contributed directly to the stagnation of the music industry. Because when one artist is artificially claiming an outsized share of the streaming revenue pool, every other artist gets less. And when those artists make less, fewer people want to invest in music as a viable career. And when fewer people invest in music as a career, the creative output of the entire culture suffers. The downstream effects of what Drake is accused of doing reach far beyond him personally.
And the connection between this fraud operation and Drake's ongoing contract dispute with UMG adds a genuinely unsettling layer to everything we already knew about that situation. Because if Drake has been using fraudulent streaming numbers to establish his market value and to justify demanding an ever larger contract from his label, If the $400 million deal he reportedly received was secured in part on the basis of metrics that were being artificially inflated, then the entire conversation about what Drake is worth as a commercial asset becomes a completely different kind of conversation. The fraud is not just about streaming. It is potentially about the financial foundation of his entire business relationship with the most powerful music company in the world.
And for the people who have continued to insist that Drake's financial position is strong, that he is a genuine billionaire, and that any suggestion of financial pressure is just a narrative pushed by his detractors, no competent, genuinely wealthy business person in the entertainment industry commits fraud on this scale. This is not the behavior of someone operating from a position of real strength. This is the behavior of someone who has been manufacturing the appearance of strength, while the actual foundation beneath it has been held together by an elaborate and illegal scheme. And the lawsuit being filed in federal court on the first day of 2026 is the first serious attempt to expose that foundation for what it actually is.
And the parallel to the Not Like Us lawsuit is impossible to ignore once you have read through this complaint. Because throughout that entire legal filing, Drake spoke with extraordinary specificity about bot manipulation, fake streams, and algorithmic gaming, almost as if he was describing something he understood intimately from the inside, rather than something he was hypothesizing about from the outside. And at the time, many people noted that the accusations felt strangely personal and strangely detailed. Now, reading this RICO complaint, the reason for that specificity becomes much clearer. When Drake accused Kendrick of benefiting from artificial streams, he was describing the exact playbook he had been running himself. And the lawsuit he filed was, in a very real sense, the most direct confession he could have made without filing an affidavit.
And the implications for how we understand Drake's entire career from this point forward are genuinely staggering. Because if the fraud has been ongoing, if this is not a recent development, but a systematic practice that has been running throughout the streaming era, then virtually every metric that has been used to establish Drake's cultural dominance becomes suspect. The record-breaking stream counts, the chart positions, the royalty payouts, the contract valuations, all of it was built on a foundation that, if these allegations are true, was never real. And the idea that the most streamed artist in the history of the medium got there not through genuine audience connection, but through a coordinated criminal enterprise is not just a scandal, it is one of the most significant revelations in the history of recorded music.
And what makes all of this even more layered is what it suggests about how Drake perceives competition. Because if he has been so dependent on artificial inflation for so long, if fake numbers have been the primary mechanism through which he has established and defended his position, then the idea that Kendrick Lamar could outperform him through genuine artistry and organic audience connection would be genuinely incomprehensible to him. It would almost look like cheating from where Drake is sitting, because from inside a system built on fraud, real success looks fake. And that might explain more about the Not Like Us lawsuit and everything surrounding it than any other single detail we have uncovered.
And Aiden Ross being at the center of all of this adds yet another dimension to a network that has been loudly and aggressively trying to shape the public perception of hip-hop for the past several years through completely manufactured means. Because Aiden Ross was one of the most vocal voices accusing artists like Doechii of being industry plants, claiming that her success was artificial and that the system was propping her up. And now, sitting inside a federal RICO complaint as one of the primary co-conspirators in an industrial-scale fake streaming operation, that accusation looks less like a genuine cultural observation and more like someone describing exactly what they themselves have been doing all along.
And we do not know yet how deep this rabbit hole actually goes. The complaint is detailed, and the allegations are specific, but a full federal investigation of this scope could surface connections and participants that none of us are currently aware of. What we do know is that the people named in this lawsuit are in serious legal trouble, and if even a meaningful fraction of what is alleged here turns out to be provable in court, the ripple effects across the music industry are going to be profound. Because this is not a situation where one artist bends a rule or inflates a metric in a small way. This is a coordinated, multi-party criminal enterprise that allegedly operated at scale for an extended period of time and touched virtually every corner of how Drake's commercial presence was constructed.
The closest analogy I can find is what would happen in the film industry if it came out that the highest-grossing movies of all time had their box office numbers artificially inflated. Because the financial ecosystem that gets built on top of those numbers, the contracts, the valuations, the investment decisions, the royalty structures, all of it is predicated on the assumption that the numbers are real. And when you discover that the most commercially dominant figure in your industry has been systematically falsifying the numbers that determine how everyone else gets paid, the entire system has to be re-examined from the ground up. And that process is going to be painful, costly, and disruptive in ways that extend far beyond Drake personally.
Because from UMG's perspective specifically, if they come to understand that the artist they have paid the most money on their entire roster has been using fraud to justify those payments, the implications for every future contract negotiation, every royalty audit, every streaming deal they sign with every artist going forward are going to be shaped by this discovery. The trust that makes those deals possible is going to be severely damaged, and the leverage that artists have historically had in those negotiations, which has always been partially grounded in streaming performance data, is going to be called into question across the entire industry, not just for Drake. Every artist suffers when one person poisons the well this comprehensively.
And for UMG specifically, the position they now find themselves in is one of the most uncomfortable in the company's history. If this lawsuit has merit, if the fraud is real and the numbers are false, then their entire valuation of Drake as a commercial asset has been built on data he manipulated. The $400 million deal that was reportedly structured around his streaming dominance may have been secured through numbers that were never legitimate. And now they are sitting across from an artist who publicly called their CEO dust, while also potentially having defrauded the very system that determined what he was worth to them. The legal and financial exposure for the label is going to be significant, and the decisions they have to make about how to respond are going to be some of the most consequential in the company's recent history.
And beyond just the label, the long-term consequence for every legitimate artist operating in the streaming economy is what genuinely keeps this from being a moment of pure satisfaction. Because the precedent this sets, if Drake is found liable, is going to make labels and streaming platforms permanently more suspicious of artist performance data. They are going to tighten the mechanisms that determine how royalties are calculated and distributed. They are going to reduce the leverage that authentic streaming numbers have historically given artists in contract negotiations. And the artists who are going to pay the price for that increased scrutiny and reduced trust are not Drake. They are the people who have been building real audiences through genuine music, and who are now going to be treated with more skepticism because of what Drake allegedly did.
And that is the genuinely unsettling dimension of this, that sits underneath all of the well-deserved satisfaction of watching Drake face consequences. Because for all the humor in watching the most streamed artist in the world get hit with a federal RICO case on the first day of a new year, the actual damage that has been done is real, and it is serious, and it extends to people and communities that had nothing to do with any of this. The artists who could not break through because the algorithms were being gamed against them. The independent musicians who received a smaller share of the streaming pool because fake streams were inflating Drake's cut. The labels and platforms that made decisions based on data that was being systematically corrupted. All of those parties have been harmed, and the consequences of that harm are not going to be fully visible or fully repaired anytime soon.
And both Drake and the label system that enabled and rewarded this kind of behavior made their choices, and they are now beginning to face the consequences of those choices in ways that were always going to arrive eventually. But what I will say is this: if this is what Drake's 2026 looks like on day one, the trajectory from here is not heading anywhere good. And the only question worth asking at this point is not whether there are going to be more consequences, there clearly are, but how far the damage is ultimately going to spread before this is over. Let me know what you think about this lawsuit and everything it implies. Leave a like and subscribe if you made it this far, it genuinely helps. And check out the suggested video to see how Doechii just addressed this entire battle between real artistry and manufactured success in one of the most important songs we are going to hear this year.